Talk Zone presents the Geek Speak Radio Show with your hosts, Henry and Romo. Your top spot for everything entertainment and pop culture, including TV, movies, comics, casting news, and more. Now, here are your hosts, Henry and Romo.
Yo, producer Damien, jump on the microphone.
Hey, what's happening, Henry and Romo?
Wait a minute.
Yeah, what was that right there?
Oh, by the way, welcome back to the Geek Speak Radio Show. wait a minute. You guys are telling me that these Giants have to win 4 more games?
4 more games, man.
No, 3 more because they already won one last night.
Right.
But it's a best of 7, so you got to win 4 out of 7 games. So then from there, then that's who is crowned the world champions of the World Series.
Well, as you just heard here, as you know, fans, Henry is not a baseball guy. He's just not a baseball fan at all.
He believes that last night should have been the one game.
Yes.
You know,
I just painted a picture for you guys.
Yeah.
The Spider-Man behind. No, I just painted a picture for you guys. I told you, imagine Giants just won last night. Who was it? Damien was just saying, I thought they were going to lose, but then they came back strong. Yeah. Sounds like an exciting game. I didn't watch it. Sounded like an exciting game. Not a bandwagon jumper. And then they came back and they won. Imagine today, this morning, San Francisco going crazy. You're world champions and it's over.
One game.
But no, you still need what would you say? 3, 4 games?
3 more.
Yeah, 3 more games.
You make sense too, because let's just say they're in the game 6 or game 7's tied 3-3. You're still going to have that one game that you need to win that makes the difference. It's the make or breaker. So I understand what you're saying. One game to rule them all.
Well, it's
spoken like a true geek.
Yeah. Well, it's clear. The argument is clear that, like you were saying, Henry, Romo, you said as well. I mean, with baseball, it's just very slow. So, and the fact is that you have all these games.
All I have to say is that the freaks came out last night because it was crazy down there. I went to...
All I have to say?
Yeah.
Baseball got the wrong commissioner. Roger Goodell, who's trying to change the schedule in football, he should be the major league commissioner. Change that. Change the playoff rules there.
Well, let's just say if they clear him out this weekend, the Giants win, you might have your fringe on next week.
Next Thursday.
Yes. And then that's the point, the host Henry right now, he's really upset because he's missing tonight and last night.
I'm not really upset because you know what?
What?
It's just a TV show.
Well, come on, it's Fringe though.
Yeah, this black guy says he's different. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I understand. It is Fringe.
Yeah, Henry beat me up, y'all.
It's just a TV show. It's just the game. It's just the baseball game. Just the football game. When the Packers win, lose it, the sun still comes up the next day.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that I always find, I don't hate, but I just find funny, it's when everybody walks around saying, "Oh, we're going to go to the Super Bowls." Are you on the team? You're going to go to the Super
Right,
Bowls.
I agree. Right. I'm just speaking as I'm a bandwagon fan for the Giants. I'm being honest.
Well, but
most of the city is.
Yeah.
But
I like the A's.
It's good for the city, though. It's good to see that.
Good morale. Yeah.
There you go. It's good to see that the Giants are making.
I think Damien's right actually, because Niners haven't done anything in a decade.
Yes.
Raiders. Well, enough said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
They're lost in space.
Yeah,
the black
no comment
hole.
on that.
They're sucked into the black hole.
So it is good to see that the Giants are, achieving this kind of success.
It's very funny though. I was walking around San Francisco this morning and I noticed everyone's like, "Go Giants, go Giants!" Everyone's wearing their gear, and it's just very it's cool. Everyone's in the spirit, but I just thought it was very.
All you see is black and orange. That's all you see all around town is black and orange.
It's Halloween. Hello.
Well, yeah, that too. But it's interesting that Giants had those kind of colors. It goes perfectly with Halloween. Yeah, definitely.
Now I know what I'm going to be for Halloween.
A giant.
A giant what?
A giant beard.
Giant Romo?
A giant Romo.
It's not Cinco de Mayo. It's World Series.
Yeah.
So anyway, hi. Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome back to the Geek Speak Radio Show. Don't mind us while we talk or try to talk sports. No, Romo and Damien, they weren't in line. I'm not a baseball guy. Never have been. I'm not about to be a bandwagon jumper like most of the city is and just, oh, hey, go Giants, because if I was to do that and you were to ask me, hey, who's the third baseman or something, I have no clue. I really don't. We're making it Ape Day because we're a little late. Yes, I know, but we've done a lot of Halloween stuff and the Back to the Future Day that we had yesterday that everybody liked. It was a lot of fun, actually. And we have some Comic-Con stuff to talk to you guys about. In fact, I'll tease you a little bit. our friend David Glanzer sent us a press release reminding you two things. One, reminding you this coming Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific, go online, comiccon.org or geekspeakradioshow.com. I have the link on there. But 9 a.m. Pacific, really, if you want to get some, 8:45. Comic-Con 2011, San Diego, because they're just staying there. San Diego Comic-Con 2011 passes go on sale. So if you miss out, don't say we didn't warn you. Yeah. The other thing, David Glanzer also sent me a list of the 20 special guests that are announced for Comic-Con. I'll tell you those later. That's the tease right there.
Good.
Right now, not a tease, but right now, let's talk to someone else we met at Abe. And actually, this one is also, like everything else there, was pretty cool.
Yeah.
This one is called, it's part of a series, Pulp History. Simon Schuster is starting this. They started it actually this month, so it's should be on the stores still. There's 2 books. One is called Shadow Knights. This one, the one we're going to talk about, is called Devil Dog, the amazing true story of the man who saved America. No, not Romo. And it's written by David Talbot, familiar name to all you guys who went on Salon.com. He was the founder, and now he has written this right here. So let's talk to him about that. David, you there?
Yeah, how are you?
Doing great. Welcome to the show.
Also pumped up with Giants Theater. Glad to hear you guys chatting about that.
Well, wait.
My son was there last night, and he still hasn't come down.
Well, let me ask you first. You've always been a Giants fan, or are you just jumping on now?
I've been a Giants fan for a long time, but I got to tell you, I grew up in L.A., and when I was a kid, it was all Sandy Koufax and Maury Wills, and they were winning World Series against the hated Yankees. I've always hated the Yankees.
Me too.
But I moved up to San Francisco when I was a young man and have adopted the team and have been a big fan for years and years.
See, that's a real fan, not the bandwagon jumpers like we have out there today.
Like me.
No, I've been through some sad times of Candlestick and you know, the bad old days too. So this is great. This kind of reminds me, actually, my next book is going to be about San Francisco, not to jump too far ahead. After, you know, the craziness of the 70s, Jonestown and the SLA and the assassinations of Harvey Milk and Mayor Moscone, and how the 49ers, which were a very similar team to this year's Giants, the first Super Bowl 49er team was a team of misfits and rookies and, you know, has-beens, just like the Giants are this year. And I hope it ends the same way for the Giants.
Well, they got on the good start last night. We'll see what they do.
Yep.
So let's talk about your current work, which is Devil Dog, like I mentioned a minute ago. Which I said is part of the Pulp History series that just started with Simon and Schuster. The other one is, what is it called? Shadow Knights. So David, tell us about Devil Dog.
Well, the idea behind the series was to bring history to life in a way that, you know, people who don't normally read, you know, a lot of text, heavy history tomes, and certainly aren't interested when they study history in the classroom, which is usually a pretty boring kind of affair. But anyway, to bring history to life with lots of visuals. So these books, they have more words than sort of your graphic novel. They're not just, you know, kind of word balloons. But on the other hand, each page, as you know, has great original illustrations. The illustrations in my book were done by the wonderful underground comics legend, Spain Rodriguez, who was one of the founders of Zap Comics with the legendary Art Crumb. And so it's really terrific looking. And we have old maps and old photos, and we want every page to be kind of a feast for the eye. But the story itself is pretty amazing. It's the story of the most decorated Marine general of his day, and we're talking about the early 20th century. His name was kind of an unlikely name for a hero, Smedley Darlington Butler. He was from a prominent Philadelphia family of Quakers, but he ran off to war to join the Marines at the age of 16 to fight in Cuba during the Spanish-American War. And from there he went to China to fight in the Boxer Rebellion. He was in charge of the U.S. occupation, a very brutal occupation of Haiti. From 1915, it went actually into the 1930s. And then finally he went to World War I. He was in charge of the camp where all the young doughboys, the soldiers, came through. They disembarked there at a camp in France, and then they would come back through the same camp, you know, damaged, shell-shocked, you know, pieces of them missing, both mentally and physically. And he was so appalled by the kind of industrial-scale slaughter of World War I that finally, after years of war, Smedley Butler comes home and says, you know what, I've had it. War is a racket. War is being fought not for Uncle Sam, all these wars I've been in, but for Standard Oil, for Wall Street. And years before President Eisenhower coined the term the military-industrial complex, Smedley Butler was going around the country saying, you know, this is all about profits and money. It's not about patriotism. And he started fighting for veterans who he saw being kept in VA hospitals like dogs in a dog pen. And his career culminated in an amazing thing. He was so beloved by the veterans that when Franklin Roosevelt's elected in 1932 during another very trying time for the country economically, the Great Depression, there was a group on Wall Street centered around J.P. Morgan, which was, of course, the major bank on Wall Street in those days. It was the Goldman Sachs of its day. And they were getting concerned about FDR. They thought he was going too far to the left, helping people out of work, and so on with his social programs. And they approached Smedley Butler, who by then was retired from the Marines, but they knew how beloved he was among the rank-and-file veterans. And they said, would you lead a march of 500,000 men on Washington? We're going to arm these former soldiers, and we want to intimidate President Roosevelt into stepping down, and he'll be replaced essentially by a junta of military people and bankers. Smedley Butler led these plotters on. He kept meeting with them again and again, and he finally went before Congress, just like an old Frank Capra movie, like, you know, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And in a very dramatic testimony before a congressional committee, he exposed this plot, this coup, to overthrow President Roosevelt. So he literally, as my subtitle said, he's the man who saved America.
And again, we're talking to David Talbot, who's the author of Devil Dog, the amazing true story of the man who saved America. Now, on the press kit that I have here from Simon Schuster, their tagline says, a new series of illustrated tales so dramatic and thrilling, they have to be true. And I was going to ask you, is this based on a true story, or is it a true story?
No, it's word for word true. It's thoroughly documented. After founding Salon, I started writing books, and I wrote an earlier book on the Kennedy brothers, so I am very happy to work like a historian, like a wonk in the library and the archives. This book was heavily researched at the Quantico Marine Base in Northern Virginia, which Smedley Butler once ran. I went to his home, his former family home outside Philadelphia, and through the courtesy of his granddaughter, went through his papers, his personal papers. So yeah, this is very thoroughly documented, and every word is true.
It is a very good book. I don't have the book, but I do have some excerpts here, and I do have the link up on GeekSpeakRadioShow.com. You guys can go on there and take a look at it. Talking to David Talbot, we'll be back after a few minutes and continue the conversation.
Geek Speak Radio Show will be right back.
Attention all bases, attention all bases. This is
The Geek Speak Radio Show on TalkZone.com.
And we're back. The Geek Speak Radio Show. Hey, everybody. Hey, Romo. Hey, how are you dancing?
I am actually playing the air guitar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're back on the Geek Speak Radio Show talking to David Talbot, who's the author of Devil Dog, the amazing true story of the man who saved America. Now, actually, Romo, you had a question for him.
Yeah. What's it called? I wanted to know, how did you find these stories that have been hidden from us in your research for Devil Dog?
Yeah, because we don't find these in history books.
Yeah.
It's true, and in a way, it's not that hard. In the case of Smedley Butler, if you read sort of standard biographies, say of Franklin Roosevelt, he'll pop up as a footnote. And even at the time, the media, was all over him. At first, he was a hero in the media when he was, fighting wars and doing America's bidding wherever he was sent in the world. But when he came home and started to question American foreign policy, and particularly when he got involved in exposing this coup plot against FDR, then he became very controversial in the media. And Time magazine went after him and tried to dismiss the whole thing, said, he was just kind of making this up in his mind. It's, he had gone crazy and this and that. But the Congressional Committee, which was chaired by John McCormack, who later became Speaker of the House for many years, when he was retired, he later said, no, this man was for real, and he was the guy who prevented America from going the way of Hitler and Mussolini. So partly it was because the media sort of had dumped on Butler and pushed him aside, that he became a forgotten figure in America. He was he was controversial. And that's what we often find, that when things are controversial, when they challenge sort of the conventional wisdom, the way we've been taught history in classrooms, that they do get swept under the rug. But if you dig deep enough, you'll see this stuff. For instance, when I wrote my book about the Kennedys, which my previous book, I wanted to know what Bobby Kennedy had really thought had happened in Dallas, because Bobby, of course, was JFK's beloved brother and as Attorney General. And I'd read these kind of cryptic remarks he'd made that suggested he didn't buy the Warren Report, the official story. And so that's what gave me the idea to investigate that book. And there's always clues out there, if you read between the lines, and as I say, if you read the footnotes. But it's certainly not the history that we're going to find in Ken Burns documentaries on PBS, or the Texas Board of Education down in Texas would want us to read their new curriculum. Is a very patriotically correct curriculum that suggests the founding fathers didn't even believe in the separation of church and state. So, everyone tries to rewrite history. As Arthur Schlesinger, the great historian, said, history is an ongoing, never-ending argument. And according to your politics and your point of view and whether or not you're part of the status quo or not, you're going to bring a different perspective to it. But we want to dig up the stories that we know not only will enlighten people and say, this is America too, but we'll also, get young people interested in history again. Say, it's not all about guys in white wigs. It's muddier and dirtier and gorier and more exciting and more dangerous, than we're taught in the classroom.
Was it a hard sell to Simon and Schuster, or were they aboard right from the beginning?
Was it a hard sell to Simon Schuster? Not so much. They liked it right away. They were, to their credit, they were willing to take a risk. They didn't have much experience in the graphic novel area. And this is something even different than the graphic novel. So it's a genre that really is, as I say, because they have more words, it's sort of an interesting blend of words and pictures. But they were willing to give it a risk. Depending on how these books do, we'll see if we go further. But we have some great ideas for other books in the series. My sister, Margaret Talbot, is also involved in the series, and she's a wonderful staff writer for the New Yorker magazine. And she found out about this amazing episode in American history during the 1920s, when the Ku Klux Klan basically took over the state of Indiana. We always associate, the KKK with the Deep South, of course. But they really were making major inroads throughout in many states in America, including Indiana in those years. And the sort of grand dragon, a former sleazy salesman named D.C. Stevenson, who ran the Klan in Indiana, basically took over the state. And he had the governor in his pocket. He had the legislature in his pocket. But they ran the state sort of like the Taliban. They would pistol whip divorced women on the streets of Indiana cities who they thought were, fallen women. They would, of course, lynch blacks and targeted Catholics and immigrants, just like a lot of intolerant people today. And finally, though, they took on too much. They bit off more than they can chew. They went into the streets of South Bend, Indiana, home of Notre Dame University, of course, Catholic university, and a lot of Catholic immigrant kids going there. And they got into pitched violent battles with Knute Rockne's famous Fighting Irish football team. And the Fighting Irish were tougher than the Klan, and they pushed the Klan out of that part of Indiana, and that was the beginning of the end for them. So again, this is great history, great exciting history with heroes and villains, and hopefully we'll be able to tell that story as well.
Hey, David, this is Damien. I just wanted to ask you, well, first off, I got to say I'm a big geek for history. I love history, especially at this particular time when Roosevelt was president. I want to ask you, so when you found these stories, did you find yourself mentally going back in time and putting yourself in that time period?
Absolutely.
To really,
you know, as I say, I'm a total research geek, and once you start seeing the letters that these people wrote, you know, including letters that young Smedley Butler, when he was just a young lieutenant, only 18 years old and leading a platoon of Marines in China during the Boxer Rebellion, which was a very strange and exotic war halfway around the globe. But the letters he wrote home when he thought he was going to die the next day, you know, that was in the archive that I found at the Marine base in Virginia, Quantico. And, you know, you get chills down the back of your neck sometimes reading this, because it's as if he's in the room there, you know, talking to his mother and his family about, well, I may not make it, and here's what I want you to know. And it's beautiful, you know, writing from the heart. So, yeah, I mean, you do get transported back in time. And the thing about going back to the Roosevelt era, the Great Depression, is you realize, as Faulkner once wrote, the past is not dead. It's not even past. I mean, the stuff that was going on during the Depression with a liberal president in office trying to literally save the country, I mean, it was coming apart. People were so desperate. A quarter of the workforce was out of work. People didn't know where their next meal was going to come from. And in that kind of desperation, all sorts of things start, you know, popping up. Forget the Tea Party. There were like armed groups of fascist armies, private armies springing up in America. There was a group in Detroit that was very powerful in Detroit. It was like the Klan. It was called the Black Legion, but they wore black hoods instead of white hoods. And they were attacking Democratic Party officials. They were blowing up union halls and assassinating union leaders. They were being financed, it turns out, by the DuPont family, which was the family who owned General Motors. And, you know, they didn't want any union activity there. They were lynching blacks. They were one plot was to contaminate the cheese and milk being delivered to Jewish families. I mean, the New York Times was very alarmed about this. The press was very alarmed about this. They made a movie about this, even with Humphrey Bogart, called Black Legion. You can find it. It's fascinating. So, I mean, this is what FDR was contending with. And, you know, people didn't know whether or not democracy was going to be overthrown, whether we were going to have some kind of fascist government like Europe, where, of course, Hitler was coming to power, in Germany, and Mussolini in Italy. So, you know, we all read now about all the troubles that this country is going through, and Obama trying to figure things out, while, you know, a lot of people are obviously genuinely disturbed with the direction the country's going in. But, man, back in FDR's days, things were even wilder.
We're talking Devil Dog, the amazing true story of the man who saved America, illustrated by Spain Rodriguez and written by David Talbot, who's on the phone with us now. And, David, you mentioned a story about San Francisco. That's not part of the Pulp History series, is it?
No, that's just going to be a normal book, but I hope to get a lot of photos, because, I mean, that history is pretty wild, too. I mean, these are the days when I first came to San Francisco when all hell seemed to be breaking loose. It was like the 60s were falling apart. You know, it was the golden era here. San Francisco, I think, really created the 60s. It was a dialogue, a cultural dialogue in some ways between San Francisco and London. And, in fact, I tell a great story about how a group of from the Grateful Dead band members and bikers, Hell's Angels, went to London at one point to meet with the Beatles in 1968 to see if the Beatles were cool enough to be part of the Cultural Revolution. And it's a great story. John Lennon almost ends up being stomped to death by Hell's Angels at the Beatles Christmas party in 1968. Anyway, so things, you know, were both, it was sort of the best and the worst of times. I mean, the 60s were beautiful and experimental and wild and crazy, but then things started to fall apart, of course, after Charlie Manson and Altamont, the Bloody Rock concert. And I think once people realized there wasn't going to be a revolution, things turned very sour. And Nixon had come in, and there was great repression in the country. And so San Francisco, I think, then went through traumas like no other city went through, because we had been to the heights and now we were in the depths. So you had Patty Hearst in the SLA, you had terrorism, you know, in the city, you had assassination attempts on the mayors, even before Mayor Moscone. And of course you had Zebra and Zodiac, these strange serial murderers running around, and then Jonestown, the biggest mass suicide in American history. And finally, the city starts to come out of it, though. And I think with, as I said earlier, this kind of Cinderella team, the football team, the 49ers. And then also, more importantly, it's how the city dealt with AIDS, where basically the rest of the country, President Reagan was in office then, said, San Francisco, you're on your own. You're the crazy fringe. We're not going to do anything, to your epidemic. Deal with it. And so the city did deal with it sick and dying. And, of course, we went through our own panic here when AIDS initially hit, but then the city really did the right thing. And I think it was in coming out of all that blood and strife and suffering that San Francisco really developed what's now called San Francisco values. And those values are really to take care of people who need to be taken care of and to tolerate people who are different. The freak, like Tim Lincecum, I mean, in Philadelphia, here it is 2010, and people in Philadelphia are like whistling at him like he's a girl. I mean, dudes, get over it. People have long hair, Some young people have long hair. Some old people have long hair. But San Francisco is the kind of city that doesn't think twice about Tim Lincecum while he gets whistled at in other cities. So I love this city, and this is my Valentine to San Francisco. The book will be called Season of the Witch, The Fall and Rise of San Francisco. And it'll be out next year. I hope we can talk about it then.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to come back and talk about it then. Do you have anything planned for the Pulp History series?
Yeah, I just wrote a screenplay. Oliver Stone asked me to write a screenplay, and we're hoping that gets made into a film. I see it as kind of an American Lawrence of Arabia. I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with that classic movie, but made by the great British director David Lean in the early 60s, and it introduced young Peter O'Toole to stardom. But it was a great story about the British Empire, in the Middle East, and how this young sort of idealistic warrior for the empire gets caught up in that and then sees the downside, the ugly side of that empire and how it sells out colonial peoples around the world. And I think that's what happened with Smedley Butler. He was young, patriotic, very idealistic. He thought he was fighting for the right causes around the world, but then he too began to question it. So I hope, it would be a big movie with lots of, panoramic landscapes and fighting all around the world. But, so we'll have to see who will finance it. But I hope it does get made. I think it would be a terrific film. So there's that. And then, of course, we're trying to just spread the word about the books and, speaking here and there and hope they catch on.
It is a good book, like I said. You guys go on there on geekspeakvideoshow.com. The links are up there. David Talbot, thanks a lot for coming on and talking to us about Devil Dog.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and like I said, you're welcome back anytime to talk about any of your future projects.
I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, David.
Bye-bye.
You were looking through it as we were talking.
Yeah.
Like it?
Love it.
It's not a comic book, not like The Unemployed Man.
Mm-hmm.
It's an actual book. It's called Pulp History for a reason, because it's like a pulp magazine, which in case there's some of you out there who don't know what I'm talking about, like David mentioned, it has letters, a lot of letters, but it also has illustrations, not pictures, illustrations on the side.
Yeah.
So it looks like you're looking at kind of like a newspaper.
Yeah, what I love about it, I mean, not only you got to understand, it's not only you learn a lot through history, but let's just say this: we all grew up loving comic books in the Golden Age and Silver Age, but you really don't know what the times that they were dealing with when what comic book was out. So it's kind of interesting to get two sides: the history side that was going on, and then of course the comic book. So
for a history geek like our producer Damien, there's some stories that are not going to be found in your typical history book in school.
Yeah.
So there you go. David Talbot's book, again, it's called Devil Dog, The Amazing True Story of the Man Who Saved America, illustrated by Spain Rodriguez, another name that everybody out there knows. David Talbot, also, you guys remember him as the founder of Salon.com. Mm-hmm. The links are up on GeekSpeakRadioShow.com. So let's take a break. When we come back, how about you and I, since this is going to be the only time we have to talk.
Yeah.
Had a lot of really good guests this week, actually. But let's talk about, we sort of talked about the event. We didn't talk about Tower Prep. I know that
that's a good show.
Yeah, you watched it a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I also know for a fact that Paul Dini, he is following us on Twitter, and he's friends with us on our Facebook page, and he's interested in, and I think you mentioned it on the air, he's interested in learning what we think as the series goes along. So if you're listening, Paul, you're going to get an earful, nothing bad, but an earful of what we thought of the second episode and some other stuff. I believe there is some Batman news we need to talk about.
Yeah, we do.
So stay right there. We'll be back, and we'll talk about it.
Geek Speak Radio Show will be right back.